Hi, it's nice to see you again. I'm Honeybat, and today I want to talk to you about art and haunting in the RPG Maker game Ib. Now, I know it's pronounced Eve, but I'm going to say it Ib throughout the video, because that's how I always learned to say it before I looked it up for this script. And it's a translation anyway, so, you know, Gary's meant to rhyme with starry, so...
Ib is a lesser-known RPG Maker game made by Kaori that really took off for the 2012 era of short atmospheric horror games, such as Yume Nikki, Mad Father, and The Witch's House. A lot of these games were heavily story-focused, and therefore having realistic art wasn't really important. All creators used the pixel art style to their advantage, and used the charm of the medium to create some beautifully stylized scenes, and allowed players to build their own narrative in the backdrop provided for them. Yume Nikki is the best example of this, inspiring volumes of fan games full of weird and wonderful imagery. Some even inspired franchises like Lisa, having players theorise as much or as little as they liked about the setting and what it implied about the characters. To this day, I have a huge soft spot for Dot Flow, and have some shirts with their echo on them.
All of my friends must know of the mighty Glub Glub.
But Ib combines the atmospheric storytelling and visual appeal of the RPG Maker era by focusing its story around art and creation. I can't think of a better horror setting than a haunted art gallery. Until I played Ib, it had never occurred to me, but now I'm surprised I hadn't seen it anywhere else before. Especially as atmospheric horror tends to lean towards the artistic, whether it's the story of a tortured artist or as part of the capital G Gothic genre, with its focus on beauty and decay. The Gothic capitalizes on the uncanny, using art as a method to invoke anxiety in the reader, viewer, or player. One of the classic examples of this would be a stately manor lined with ancestral paintings and statues to build the anxiety that there's someone unseen, a nearly human memory watching you. The recently released hauntings of Hill House and Bly Manor are excellent examples of this, and both focus their introductory sequences around distorting statues and paintings, their subjects fading into unrecognisable humanoid ruin. Both focus on a titular house that is burdened with a legacy, untold stories that demand to be heard and encroach on the present. The opening words in Hill House are lifted directly from the book that the series was adapted from, and talks about the house as if it has the capacity to dream, telling us that the house holds its secrets consciously, alone in the dark. A home, the private sanctuary you seek comfort in, turns against you. I watched a wonderful video essay on the anatomy of the haunted house by Jacob Geller, and I'll link it down in the description, definitely go watch it. But the way they talked about hauntings prodded something in my memory back towards Ib, and I instantly wanted to replay it and look at what stories it wanted to tell me. It begins with a quiet 9-year-old girl taking a birthday trip to an art museum with her parents. They let her wander through the gallery, and you can look at the fictional artist World of Guertena's exhibits, which range from paintings to sculptures and tactile flossy trees. The story is told through interacting with and running from the more dangerous artworks, but for now Ib can wander freely and chat to the other patrons. One thing I really love about making the protagonist a young child is that some of the longer titles that are too complex for her to understand can't be read by the player. It's not just that Ib can't make any sense of them, you can't either, which is effective in putting the player into her shoes. Any words that are too complex for her to understand are replaced with... And this is even underlined in a later puzzle when Gary asks her what the title of the deep sea painting was. Ib has to guess because the missing word was above her reading level, so there's no way for you to already know. This may seem odd if you've only played the English translation, but given that the game was originally written in Japanese, it makes much more sense when you consider its complex kanji that she doesn't understand, rather than basic hiragana.
I didn't notice this for many years, and always kind of wondered why the 9-year-old couldn't read.
Also, complex kanji can be artistic in their own right, and so adds extra flair to the art, especially if Guertena is being particularly metaphorical or lyrical in his titling. As I can barely read kanji myself, I wouldn't know. If anyone has anything to offer language-wise, let me know in the comments. It's also why Ib can ask Gary why he speaks like a lady, but there's no real way to fully express his speech patterns to the same extent in English, so it seems an unwarranted question in the translated version. As Ib wanders, she finds a long tableau named a wonderfully bright mess of colours, and as she examines it, the lights flicker, the background music stops, and Ib decides that perhaps she should go and rendezvous with her parents. However, upon leaving the painting-filled corridor, Ib finds herself completely alone, despite the gallery being packed only moments ago. Her parents are gone, and the tacking sounds of shoes echo down the hall. Interacting with the paintings makes the boundary between art and reality wobble dangerously, as fruit falls from a bowl to Ib's feet, subjects cough and cats meow at her from their frames. Following painted footsteps, Ib dives down into the abyss of the deep painting and finds herself in a fabricated world made of an artist's whimsy. Reality is largely what we agree it is. A rule doesn't exist if nobody follows it, and it doesn't naturally occur, like gravity. Humans make their own societal gravity, sanding off those little bits of unpleasantness with shame and guilt. Allowing people to bend, transform, and parody those rules in art is not only a wonderful outlet for swallowed feelings or unsettling concepts, it can also change reality. If you change the way you approach a situation, then that situation implicitly changes to you, even if outwardly there's no difference. Perhaps a child loses a tooth, and you tell them that the tooth fairy will swap it for some money if they sleep with it under their pillow. When they wake up in the morning, they rush downstairs excitedly to tell you that, "Look, the tooth fairy visited!" Now, compare that to a child who loses a tooth, and you immediately hand them a pound coin in exchange. The outcome's the same. The child lost a tooth, and they received money in exchange for it. But to the child, the story attached to that tooth is completely different. It allows them to believe in a more magical world, and enhances the experience of losing their milk teeth. In ghost stories, people who are attuned to the supernatural are usually unencumbered by the social scripts of polite society, or have chosen to disregard them to varying degrees, and choose to look at what's been silenced with empathy.
It's a form of magic.
And it changes what you see. Art is a concentrated physical manifestation of that magic, and it lets you see the world differently. In Ib, even the health system is artistic, life blooming as a rose for each of the characters you control: Ib, Gary, and Mary. Ib finds a red rose, and though the gallery openly calls her a thief for taking it, it's clearly meant for her. Her life is tied to the petals, and if all 5 fall, then she too will wither away, a la Beauty and the Beast. Gary, a soft-spoken young man, has a blue rose, which will double the number of petals, which makes him more physically resilient, but he's often shown to be much more easily frightened by the gallery than Ib. But Ib needs him there as both a comforting adult presence, and to move heavier objects out of the way for her. You can also read the titles of paintings to Ib, and if you unlock the extra gallery, you can view all the artwork that Ib's learned the names of, which is pretty neat. The majority of the gameplay revolves around solving puzzles in good old block-pushing key-finding style, but it's done in a way that embraces the art style beautifully. Guertena's art isn't necessarily communicated to be visually spectacular due to the art style of the game, but most of the pieces are incredibly memorable, and their liveliness in the gallery speaks to how much of himself he put into their creation. His body of work, his legacy, is actually part of his soul, just as superstitions speak to photographs capturing the soul of the subject. All that he found beautiful he wanted to capture: jugglers, fishermen, flowers and women, anything vibrantly alive. It's interesting then that there's no self-portrait of him anywhere in the gallery. Initially playing the game, I half expected Guertena to pop out of a painting and explain his philosophy to me in Ib, but this never happens. The closest we get are speculations on his work through the painting descriptions in catalogues, but even those are very short snippets, and that's something I can definitely appreciate. The work of the artist is up to the viewer to interpret, just like reality. The layout of the gallery itself is winding, and though carefully structured, still feels very open floor by floor. The majority of the puzzles require investigation across a whole floor, ducking in and out of rooms and interpreting what a particular art piece wants or needs to be whole. And I do mean wants, as some of them outright speak to Ib, grab her as she passes, or spit on her to amuse themselves, playfully wiggling a tongue at her. For instance, there's a painting on one of the earlier floors that implies coyly that it likes her pretty flower, muttering that flowers are nice, and asking to smell it. Though it doesn't outright demand you hand over your rose, it does keep sniffing at it, and it won't let you pass until you give it something. If you do hand over Ib's rose, the painting immediately crunches it up with jagged teeth, and Ib dies. To get some other flowers for it to snack on, you have to find the missing rings for a woeful bride and groom, hidden away behind several other interlocking closed rooms, fulfilling all of the art's needs and desires. And when you place the ring on the correct finger of the bride's left hand, she'll throw a bouquet from her painting, blushing happily. The atmosphere is also enhanced by the game's soundtrack. It's mostly comprised of classical-sounding strings, grand piano, and music boxes, which help to form the initial impression of the gallery as being home to fine art. A lot of the music is quiet and understated, such as Gary's theme for moments of calm, or the sad little motif that plays when you get a game over. Even the chase sections of the game ramp up their intensity through the music, but not with the tortured string performances you might expect from horror soundtracks. No, they use tinkling percussion with some distorted whirling sounds to communicate strain and urgency. Off-putting and unfamiliar sounds make the instruments difficult to place, which makes even the music feel uncanny at times, and is in striking opposition to the guitars, violins and pianos that are instantly recognisable elsewhere. We hear the same thing with the music box tracks, as music boxes are generally associated with creepy children, dolls and cheap horror movies these days. The track that plays in a game over scenario is even titled The Little Doll's Dream, again linking it to the uncanny. The music box that sounds bouncier and cheerful, more alive, is Mary's theme, Puppet, and we find out later in the game that she isn't actually human, but a painting that gained a sense of self, too full of life to be constrained in a canvas. The gallery quite literally reaches out to people, trying to connect to them, though its intentions aren't exactly harmless. Ib's youth and innocence shield her from the worst the gallery has to offer, but as an adult, Gary has the gallery spit at him, pursue him relentlessly with mannequin heads. Unlike Ib, he's able to see the creepy blue dolls that demand his friendship and attention from the outset. From Ib's perspective, we see a room full of cute porcelain bunnies instead of the dolls, all different pastel colours. And Mary, as a part of the gallery, naturally finds their actual appearance cute. She asks Ib's opinion of them, and the player gets a choice on how to respond. Most people tend to find bunnies cute, and so respond in kind, but we get a very odd reaction from Gary when agreeing with Mary. He seems unsettled and can't quite believe that Ib likes this kind of thing. It's a little off, but Mary can't wait to be on the move, so often the remark slips under the radar until we return to the room alone as Gary. And it's full of weird blue puppets with goggled eyes and unsettling stretched grins. Gary doesn't want to be in here, and neither does the player, after realising that maybe what we've been seeing in the gallery is a little more open to interpretation than previously thought. Without Ib's filter, what might we see in the next room? Who knows? And therein lies another layer of fear. It seeds doubt in the player's mind as to how much they're seeing can be trusted, and how much danger Ib is truly in. How can you defend yourself from a trusted friend if you see the knife in their hand as a flower? Gary hurries to meet up with Ib and Mary, but finds himself stalked by the little blue dolls who always move just out of sight. The side-scrolling nature of this level allows the dolls to appear just into the next section of corridor, as if it's bounding up to play, scrolling messages on the wall and asking why Gary isn't taking it with him, getting increasingly agitated. In order to solve this floor's overarching puzzle, balls of paint must be hunted down by both Ib and Gary's floors to fill in a rainbow bridge colour by colour. The dolls know this, and ask what Gary's doing and say they want to play too, and so squirrel away the final ball, hiding it inside one of their stomachs. Or, if Gary was a jerk, they only have the head left to hide their treasure. Please, don't kick the dolls. The first hint we get that this isn't going to go well is the doll audibly giggling and running inside of a room, slamming the door behind it. Gary finally sees it move. Touching the doorknob in pursuit reveals it's suspiciously cold, and entering the room reveals, well, this. This was definitely the most stressful section of the game for me, and one of the most memorable. A countdown begins, as do a series of gong-like chimes counting down as a massive version of the blue doll begins to creep up its canvas frame by frame. It reaches further and further out as Gary frantically rips open the stomachs of the little blue dolls, searching for the key to let him out of the room. If you fail, Ib finds him in pleasant conversation with the dolls, disguised once again as bunnies, and has to slap him out of it as he can no longer respond to his name or Ib touching his shoulder. And if he fails to revive him, he can just be trapped there, vaguely chattering, presumably forever. And here we see that the gallery isn't making these connections out of loneliness or boredom, or even out of a sense of fun, but out of possessiveness. The major enemy type you find throughout the gallery is the Lady in Red painting, which is copied throughout many of the floors, and has counterparts wearing various coloured dresses. When we first meet Gary, he's lying on the floor, moaning in pain. To cure him, Ib needs to retrieve his blue rose and pop it in some water, but to find it she needs to follow a trail of blue petals. This reveals the thief to be one of the gallery's ladies, who's having a lovely time playing Loves Me Not with Gary's life. Fortunately, she drops it to chase our protagonist, but as Ib escapes, rose in hand, the painted lady demonstrates her tenacity by bursting through the window in pursuit. I loved this moment because it caught me off guard, as an earlier encounter with a lady had taught me that they couldn't open doors to give chase, and so I assumed I was safe. I thought wrong. Most of the enemies in-game are these possessive ladies, wanting attention, and who are based around the faceless women that pursued Guertena for his wealth and fame. The other major enemy types are headless mannequins, reaching blindly for Ib and Gary, or their disembodied heads that can't physically pursue you, but can watch and judge your actions. If Gary kicks ahead in anger or Ib accidentally breaks them, then these actions will count against you in trying to get the best ending. Even the blue dolls, though they don't technically pursue you, want your attention and love. They want to be played with and interacted with. Look at me. Play with me. The gallery even says in its rules, no leaving ever. It wants to possess. Mary's the best example of this, as of all the artwork, she has the most freedom to act. She decides that Ib will be her friend, and tries to push her and Gary apart constantly, asking Ib leading questions about which of them she prefers and coaxing her to agree with her opinions on the gallery. Depending on how you answer, she becomes increasingly frustrated and angry with Gary, and will always decide to try and stab him with a palette knife. Mary's rose is yellow, the colour of both friendship and jealousy in the language of flowers, and she definitely acts the part. She knows she's a painting, and desperately wants to be real and leave the gallery, but the only way to do so is to take the place of one of the living people. There are multiple endings depending on how you treat Gary, Mary, and the gallery, but there is an ending where Mary succeeds and inserts herself into Ib's family, becoming her sister, and leaves Gary behind as a painting, the hanged man. Ib is disoriented and seems to have forgotten her adventure, and Mary confiscates Gary's lighter, telling Ib that it's dangerous, or snatches the candy that Gary gave her and eats it to ensure it won't trigger any of her memories, apparently making the change permanent. What would you consider to be haunted in your own life? Now really, think about it. I don't just mean heirlooms or objects from lost loved ones. Where have you left traces of yourself? What traces live inside you? I have a particular spoon that I always eat with, and I've seen my partner pick it up for her own meal and then pause. No, that's Bats. And put it down again. Even if she didn't say anything, for a moment I was there, in that spoon. What habits have you picked up from friends you've lost touch with? Interacting with people and the things they love, or even hate, changes you. And in that vein, I want to circle back around to Hill House for a moment. In one of the later episodes, the father of the family, Hugh Crane, mentions witness marks, which are repair marks left behind on clocks that can tell you what work's been done over time, even when there's no written record. By becoming familiar with the marks repair tools make and the conditions a clock's been left in, you can read an entire history from tiny lines and gashes. Hugh brings this up in relation to the haunted house his family escaped from years ago, telling his son, Stephen, that he only thinks he understands the house. That he can see the witness marks, but can't read them, and so is constantly coming to the wrong conclusion. Stephen's convinced that he's never seen a ghost, and decides his family members who have experienced the supernatural are mentally ill, but his father prompts him about an account he'd written about a repairman he saw in the house as a child. The family were on a tight budget, and as such were doing house repairs largely under their own steam, but Stephen wrote specifically about a man in strangely old-fashioned overalls with a handlebar mustache repairing a clock that had stood out to him. And Hugh forces him to stop and think about why the man would even have been there. He was out of place enough that he was noteworthy to young Stephen, but he wasn't properly considered, a little splinter at the back of his mind that's quickly disregarded. The show is littered with tiny incongruities like this for the entire runtime, and it's extremely engaging if you're watching with your mystery-solving hat on. Things you've dismissed always come back to bite you, and it is excellent storytelling. The whole linchpin of the show's plot, which I'm not going to spoil here, hinges on this theme of the unacknowledged being blithely accepted or forcibly buried, and it becomes key to understanding the tragedies of the house and their perpetuation. The housekeeper's wife initially refused to help with the new occupants, the Cranes, until she found out it was a family about to move in, but she didn't want to witness anyone else being fed to it, especially children. The undying emotions and motivations of the house's former occupants continue to fuel it, but it's consumed by a mindless hunger, slowly dragging people down into the dark. And there's something quintessentially gothic about the ceaseless intrusion of the past. In both Ib and Hill House, ghosts serve as witness marks, giving insight into the people that once felt so strongly about their art or their families, if only someone would stop to listen. But where the ghosts in Hill House are far more literal and embody the desires of the house filtered through its claimed residents, Ib's ghosts are struggling to gain their own senses of self and trying desperately to reach out to the living, not to return to them, but to become them. Mary isn't content just being one of Guertena's witness marks. She's relentlessly alive and cheerful, but also has little concept of boundaries, and possesses a certain childish enthusiasm and callousness alongside this. Ib, being a shy and well-brought-up child, often lets Mary speak over her, and goes along with her whims, and it usually falls to Gary to tell her no. Obviously this fuels her hatred of him, and makes her decision easy when it comes to which person to replace, and so she focuses all of her possessive efforts on Ib, as they're similar in age, and Ib will provide her with the friendship and affection she craves. In one ending where Mary tries to escape from the gallery alone, without Ib to cling to, her attempt fails, and the gallery shows it's prepared to punish her for it. Her lack of personal boundaries and knowing whether it's appropriate to barrel on through a conversation demonstrates her lack of real friends and socialization, which she tries to make up for with the dolls and her own drawings. But also, the demands for acknowledgement by the gallery as a whole seem to be a way of the art asserting itself as being real. Several pieces of text in the game state that Guertena rarely painted from life, but was hugely inspired by it, reinterpreting what he saw before recording it on canvas. His art is the emotions and essence of what he saw, not an exact replica, and the game tells us that Mary isn't based on any real person, despite looking so lifelike. In some ways, the gallery is a more liberated version of his everyday world, but when that art comes to life, it can't mix with true reality. It doesn't even know how. The gallery tries to lure Ib to stay in a fun world with no adults and indulge in the freedom and creativity that comes with youth, but Mary's solo escape plan failing seems to be the gallery clinging to a part of itself. No, you're one of us. You belong here. Perhaps Mary knows deep down that she won't be able to integrate alone, a lost child in a foreign world, but she desperately wants the freedom to explore something new and bigger than herself. The entirety of the gallery is bristling with life and beauty, but is plagued with a pressing sense of loneliness. Despite all of its alluring artwork, it's ultimately a place for people to pass through, ultimately liminal, and it seems it's become dissatisfied with being admired but never truly known and loved. We can only guess at how the artist Guertena wanted to be remembered, but I would say with fondness rather than just academic admiration. The art is personal and wants to be personal with its viewer. It craves interaction, and over time has learned to demand that, and I think it's the blend of excitable, almost puppyish playing with guests, to the desperate and ugly demands for love and attention that really captured my imagination. If Guertena's spirit, or the spirits of his subjects, are really still caught in their frames, can you really blame them for wanting to be remembered?
So, hi! Thanks for sticking around till the end. It's been a long time favourite of mine, so this was quite a nostalgic script for me to write. Let me know down in the comments about your experiences with hauntings, whether you've actually seen a ghost or just the hauntings you carry around close to your heart. Like and subscribe to keep up with my content, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!